What you're about to hear isn't folklore, and it isn't legend. It actually happened. Not all of her paranormal encounters had been terrifying, but they were always unsettling. If only they had come with a warning, some small signal to prepare her. But they never did. They arrived without notice, always when she was alone, and most always in the middle of the night. After her husband's retirement in 2020, they decided to leave Temecula, California. They had visited the Palm Springs area many times and loved the desert, the quiet beauty, the open sky, the way life seemed to slow down there. They found what they believed was their dream home in a peaceful gated community in Rancho Mirage. The one thing she had lightly considered was its proximity to a cemetery. Normally, cemeteries didn't bother her, but with her lifelong sensitivity to things paranormal, she understood somewhere deep down that something was bound to happen. But she thought she could live with that. Then the pandemic descended upon the world. In her 60 years on this earth, she had never witnessed anything so surreal. It felt as though reality itself had quietly collapsed. Bustling cities became ghost towns. Streets stood empty. Time felt suspended. She and her husband were fortunate. They were not affected personally. Their home was beautiful, comfortable. Beyond the privacy wall in their backyard stretched desert scenery that glowed at sunset. There was peace. There was safety. But the sorrow beyond the community gate was impossible to ignore. The most heartbreaking part was the separation. Loved ones lost without goodbyes. Unattended funerals became the norm, 2, sometimes 4 in a single day. A never-ending cycle of grief. One night, well past midnight, she sat hunched over her computer at the dinette wall desk. The only light came from the dim fixtures above the kitchen island. The house was silent. Before turning on the computer, she paused. The dark screen reflected the hallway behind her. To the left was her husband's office. Across from it, the bathroom. Farther down, the laundry room and the master bedroom. Then, movement. The motion lights in the hallway snapped on. In the reflection, a figure stepped out of her husband's office, crossed the floor, and walked directly into the bathroom. It looked exactly like him. Same height, same build, same unmistakable silhouette. She called out his name. No answer. That was all wrong. He would never be awake at that hour. Heart pounding, she stood and walked toward the hallway. The office was dark. The bathroom was empty. She moved to the bedroom. The door was closed. Inside, her husband slept peacefully, undisturbed. She knew with absolute certainty that what she had witnessed was not him. The motion lights still glowed behind her. Something had triggered them. The dread that followed was so deep, so immediate, that the next day she bought a laptop, just so she would never again have to sit with her back to that hallway. About a week later, during her usual late-night routine, she sat on the couch instead, facing the fireplace and the hall beyond. The house was quiet. Then it came. That familiar sensation, a subtle tingling, unmistakable feeling of being watched. Reluctantly, she looked up. Standing beside the fireplace was a small figure, no more than 2.5 to 3 feet tall. It appeared almost luminous, not solid, not fully formed, like a living X-ray. Its body was partially transparent. Hollow eyes stared in her direction. Only the upper portion was clearly visible. Its legs and feet were barely existing at all. She froze. Instinctively, she shouted, "Precious Lord!" At that moment, the figure turned and passed directly through the fireplace. She jumped up and ran down the hall, waking her husband in a panic. A few nights later, she slept in their bedroom. Her husband chose to read in the guest room so he wouldn't disturb her. Eventually, he fell asleep there. She was torn awake by a sudden, unexplainable alarm in her body, as if something had entered the room without sound. Her pulse began to race. The hair on her arms stood straight up. Hovering beside her husband's side of the bed was the same small figure. It leaned closer, unmoving, watching her with those hollow eyes. The hallway light exposed it fully enough to erase all doubt. This was no dream. She blinked, then blinked again. Nothing changed. She threw back the covers, forcing herself not to look again, pretending not to have seen anything. She spoke out loud, more to herself than anything else. "Okay, it's time to get up." She had never addressed a manifestation before, and she never would. She ran through the house to the guest room and woke her husband, making him promise that he would never leave her alone while she slept again. Whether it was the pandemic, the proximity to the cemetery, or something else entirely, she couldn't shake the feeling that the house had become a conduit, a kind of crossroads, a place where spirits passed through. Being as familiar with the spirit world as she is, she understood something that others might not. Trauma does not belong solely to the living. As the pandemic tore through the world, separating families and ending lives without warning, the spirit world may have been experiencing its own reckoning. Confusion, displacement, an echo of grief. And perhaps what she witnessed wasn't intrusion, but overflow. Now you may be wondering why I tell these stories in the third person. It's a fair question. The answer is easy. Living them once was enough. Distance is survival, and that is how I deal with it.